Good morning, everyone. Today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcorn Studios, a sci-fi horror story and speed paint of the one, the only, Buster Terminax. It's been a while since we've seen this guy, so let's hop in and see what we can learn about this sci-fi bounty. Well, I guess not really bounty hunter. He doesn't kill for money or sport. He more so rescues. Sci-fi rescue.
Aviva
There you go.
Orvat stared out the window of her brother's cloaked ship, with her heart pounding harder than the rain against the hull. She wasn't nervous about the mission exactly. Stealing the bounty of another hunter was nothing new to her and her family. But the fact that it was a common occurrence was what weighed on her. "Eyes peeled, everyone. He leaves the ship, we wait 10 minutes, then we move in," Gorlin said, loading his gun, marked with 97 scratches. Each one recounted a Tykar-ranked creature he'd successfully killed with it. Aviva's heart sank more thinking about how many of those missions she'd helped out on. Aviva was the granddaughter of Kessler Orvad, creator of the Orvad Huntsmen. They were close to being the most infamous poachers in the galaxy.
Hey, cool. She's got the mantis blades from Cyberpunk.
Second maybe only to the predators of Yautja Prime. She had spent her whole life learning the skills of hunting and tracking alongside her family simply because it was expected of her. On some level, she was fine with it. She understood the value of hunting for food or for clothing if it was necessary, but what her family did was so far beyond that. They specifically hunted the most rare and endangered creatures they could track, just to make as much money off them as they could. They'd also sell some of the live creatures to people they knew very well would treat the animals horribly. Aviva kind of liked animals, and now was about to help steal an incredibly rare creature from someone who intended to help protect it. Sure, the Ketovadis was a vicious hunter itself, but it had been bred to do that and didn't know better. Aviva knew she hated her job, but did it anyway and never said anything to anyone out of fear of how they'd react.
"Hey, Gorlin, we got movement. Old wussy friend here is checking out."
Searlick, the group's resident poison crafter, said. I looked down to see an invisible garage door open, only evident because it revealed the inside of a ship. From the distance above, where Gorlin's ship was floating, Aviva couldn't tell how big this alien tracker's vessel was. Like Gorlin's, it was cloaked and nestled into the faded purple trees all around it. The door that had opened was about 20 feet wide, but the ship could have been much larger still. Aviva watched the hooded tracker, carrying some sort of staff weapon, trekking out into the rain, likely to seek the second mark of his bounty. She didn't remember his name, but she recalled from the briefing that he was working with a race called the Ishkonians. On Ishkonigan Major, they had built a nature preserve to safely house many of the exact kinds of endangered and dangerous creatures Aviva's family often sought. She hoped that by the time they'd found this guy, he'd already have gotten the 3 marks on his list and been flying off to Ishkonigan Major. Her family was ruthless, but not reckless. Even they wouldn't try invading an Ishkonian outpost or base.
Well,
They'd also
that's
always
not
been
at least.
hesitant about trying to track down the vicious Ketovadis themselves. But with this tracker having already captured and caged it for them, their job became much easier. Or so they thought. "No, I so pouty, Ev," Liatra, their markswoman, chuckled. "Sad you're not gonna finally get to dig these into someone?" She smacked her fists onto Aviva's forearms, and 2 metallic blades popped right out of her flesh. Aviva barely reacted, just looking annoyed at the tech now forged into her arms. Like most people in her family, Aviva had agreed to get mechanical body augmentations to help her in combat against tougher creatures. The blades in her arm could cut through almost anything, and worked well for climbing.
Oh yeah? Are those blades good enough to cut through a xenomorph? Yeah, call me when you can do that.
So far, she'd only used them for the latter. She hadn't even wanted them, but again, thought she had to because everyone in her family had gotten their own upgrades. Gorlin grumbled. "Leave her alone, Liatra. You know she gets quiet before missions. And she knows we can't put a scratch on this thing or our bounty cuts in half. Not that even her blades could cut through this thing anyway if it's as tough as they say. Doesn't matter anyway, though. It's already caged. We've got nothing to worry about. There's no fight to be had here. At least we'd better hope." Liatra wandered off to gather the assortment of guns she always strapped to her back for missions, and Gorlin came over. Uncharacteristically quietly for him, he asked, "You good, Aviva? Looking more out of it than usual, and this isn't the kind of guy you want to be stealing from when your head isn't in the game." She just nodded and gave a fake smile. Fine, just focused. He sighed and walked away. She'd given that same answer to him dozens of times. It was just a reflex at this point.
Most likely it's
10
just a
minutes later,
reflex.
with the alien tracker nowhere in sight, they lowered their ship as far as they could and all jumped onto the top branches of a tree. It was a slow climb down, and they all soon realized they should have just rappelled down using the wire system the ship had, even if it was a bit noisier and more conspicuous, but by then there was no point climbing back up to the ship. They got down through the rain and made it to the entrance of the invisible craft. Aviva pulled out a series of discs from her belt. 2 were stun discs that could knock most creatures out cold for whatever time she set on them. 1 was a lifelike hologram of her to distract creatures, and 1 was a
Nice.
custom-built passkey that she could use to hack into hundreds of different types of ships.
And that's
It didn't
useful.
always work, and again, she hoped it wouldn't then, but after sticking it to the invisible ship, she found she was very quickly able to get the door open. Gorlin looked at her curiously. That was fast. This guy's security really that bad? Aviva just shrugged, though it struck her as odd too. Gorlin headed inside. For a guy who...
Well, it is Buster Terminax, so he could have been expecting something like this and just left the front door unlocked. Knowing him, he most likely did just so he could beat their asses.
Who used to be one of the best alien hunters alive, you'd think he'd have better locks. That reminded Aviva of who this guy was, and just made her more nervous. He was one of the many kidnapped sons of the warlord Kahurgoth. That guy took kids from all across the galaxy and raised them, experimented on them, sold them, or whatever he wanted. This tracker had gotten away and become a prolific alien hunter until one day he just decided to stop killing altogether. He'd become a joke to a lot of people in her community because of that, but Aviva envied his ability to just make that switch. She followed her brother and allies into the
Yeah, Buster Terminax pretty much lives by the whole, you know what? This kind of mentality. And he just, this, you, everything you're doing, and just left.
ship. It wasn't particularly fancy. It looked like your average freighter ship with dim steel walls. There were a few dozen types of cages in the main entrance hub and random weapons strewn about the walls and floors. That main room was about 40 by 40 feet, but Aviva still didn't know how much bigger than that the ship was. This guy had a customizable vessel, so the core ship was likely smaller than the room they were in, but extra rooms and wings and boosters could be added or taken away for various missions.
Hey, that's
With this
good.
room looking as though it
Very
stored
useful.
most of his cages, Aviva was surprised that the Kitovadas wasn't in there. Was the ship big enough to have another full room of cages? Or had he needed an entirely separate special room to contain this thing? It wouldn't have surprised her to learn that, and that would mean it'd be much harder to steal. They got near the end of that main room and were headed for a door into the next area. Gorlin was about to press a button to open it when the bay door they entered through across the room slammed shut. An eerily cheerful voice then spoke over the PA system.
Here we go.
Hello, intruders. Welcome to the ship of Buster Terminax.
Yeah!
The dim lights that had been barely illuminating the room shut off, and it became pitch black. Gorlin tapped his shoulder, and the padding on it started to glow. Liatra pulled out another of her guns and flicked on a light attached to it. Sirlik tapped his watch, and it started to shine.
Gotta love
and
the
Aviva,
AI.
for the time being, just relied on the lights of the others. Gorlin grumbled. Guess he's got more security than we thought. Aviva, get to shutting down his AI.
Not to insult the quality of your own resources, but I wouldn't bother. If your altered D7339 security manipulation disk is a representation of the quality of technology you've brought to try and disable me, you will not have any luck achieving that goal.
Ooh.
Gorlin grumbled again. Don't listen to it, Aviva. You got us in here, you can shut it down.
Actually, I let you in upon Bustar's request. I informed him of your presence a while ago when I detected your ship in the atmosphere.
I freaking called it! I said he left the door unlocked!
When he found out it was registered as having been stolen by members of the Orvat Huntsman, he was very eager to lure you into his own vessel. Bustar isn't exactly a fan of poachers.
Sirlik whipped out 2 syringes of his most lethal poisons.
Cute, so the disgraced hunter wanted some company. Why didn't he come out and say hi then?
Gorlin snarled. Quit messing around, this isn't good. It was a trap, abort now. We don't want to mess with this guy directly. Liatra chuckled. Oh, calm down, Gorlin. What's a guy who doesn't even kill his prey anymore gonna do? Give us a stern talking to about our life choices?
Nah,
The
he's
ship
gonna
then spoke
kill
again.
him.
To clarify, Bustard does not kill the creatures he tracks any longer because he has a fascination and respect for them. With that said,
I got no rules against killing poacher scum.
Yes.
Aviva jumped as Searlick screamed at the top of his lungs and vanished into the darkness. His light was smashed. She heard cracking and thudding, followed by the terrified mutterings of him begging for mercy. Then silence. Aviva backed closer to Gorlin as he and Liatra tried to aim their lights in every direction to find Searlick or Terminax. Eventually, the sound of lumbering footsteps approached. They aimed their lights and Liatra nearly fired, but then they saw it was Searlick. His arms hung limp and his hands were mangled. His veins pulsed bright green as he choked, trying to breathe with little success. Jutting out of his neck was one of his own syringes. Aviva wanted to sprint for the exit, but was frozen in fear. Was she about to be maimed too? All over a life she didn't even want? She only shook free when Gorlin fired a shot of his own gun right into Searlick's head. He dropped to the ground. Liatra smacked Gorlin's arm. "What did you do that for?" He growled, still looking around for Bustar. "That was Searlick's xenosedite poison. He would have been melting from the inside for the next 10 minutes if I didn't put him out of his misery."
And how many times have you let a sadist like him use that on the innocent creatures you slaughter?
Terminax's voice echoed through the ship. "All right, Terminax, fine. You made your point and killed off one of my best guys. We'll back off. Just let us go."
No. I'm betting you came here to steal the Ketovatus from me. Too cowardly to hunt it yourself, so you waited till I caged it for transport, right? Bounty on that thing is pretty stacked, and so many hunters have died going after it. You know, it's been a pretty big pest to this planet since its breeder chucked it into this place. It kills the wildlife here just for fun. Kinda like you poachers. You've got a lot in common, actually. Maybe you should meet.
There was a growling shriek from deeper inside the ship, promptly followed by the scraping of running claws against metal. It was free and headed towards them. Gorlin immediately grabbed Aviva's arm and sprinted back towards the bay door. He ran right into it and grabbed her shoulders forcefully. "Get it open, Aviva, now!" He called back to Liatra. "Leah, move it, we're getting out of here!" She hadn't run with them, though. "Oh, please, this kitty cat is mine. Shove the bounty, I'm gonna show everyone what a real hunter can do." She whipped another gun off her back and held both an assault rifle in one hand and plasma shotgun in the other. The clawing sounds got louder and louder. It seemed to be right on the other side of the door in front of Liatra, and she opened fire. Gunfire lit up the room as she blasted the door to pieces. Anything behind it surely would have been torn to shreds. But as the door fell apart, she pointed her light and saw that there was nothing there. Aviva should have been trying to get the door open, but she couldn't help but watch, desperately hoping that Liatra had at least wounded the thing. The dual-wielding poacher cautiously stepped towards the doorway, head darting around. Suddenly, Aviva noticed a silhouette very slowly descending behind Liatra. It was a bladed tail. Gorlin started to scream out to warn her, but by the time the words were halfway out, the tail stabbed through Liatra's back and yanked her towards the ceiling of the ship. Her light and guns clanged against the ground as the sound of shredding claws and splattering blood echoed through the room. Gorlin snatched the security disc off Aviva and smacked it against the door. "Try something, sis. Anything, just go." He started blindly firing up in the direction of where the tail had gone. He marched away from her as she tried to use the disc to get into the ship's security, but it was now clear how incredibly locked down Bustar's security was. She couldn't do anything. She whipped back to her brother, who'd gone farther into the ship, still firing. From the light of his gun, she saw a lurking silhouette creeping across the cage top right next to him. Still horrified, but acting instinctively to protect her brother, she sprinted towards Gorlin and dove at him right as the creature did. She tackled him out of the way as the monster rolled across the ground just behind them into one of the empty cages. She leapt up, scrambled over, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut. She was astounded that she'd been brave enough to do that, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to end the horror. The creature's claw slashed right through the door, and it was quickly tearing apart the cage as if it was made of cardboard. Terminax's voice spoke again.
Alright, that was surprisingly noble for poacher scum. Tell you what, I'll give you a shot at getting away. But if you do somehow manage to live, find a new line of work.
The bay doors suddenly opened again, and seeing the dark, rainy forest felt like peering into the light of salvation. Gorlin had picked himself up, and they both sprinted out into the woods, but could clearly hear the monster behind them tearing free from its cage. It'd be on them again soon. Gorlin smacked the buttons on his ship's remote and it decloaked and moved above them. Wires started lowering down towards them, but moving far too slowly, and the ship itself couldn't get much closer because of the surrounding trees. Aviva muttered, I can't believe I'm gonna die like this. This is so stupid. I always hated this stupid job. Why am I here? Yeah, shocker, sis. You should have quit years ago. Gorlin yelled, slamming the button as if that'd make it go faster. You knew I hated being a hunter? I mean, I figured it was something like that. I've tried asking you for years what's always eating you, but I hoped at some point you'd smarten up and either talk to me or do something about it, instead of just pouting all the time. Aviva sneered. Are you serious? Mom and Dad and Gramps would have killed me if I tried to quit. I didn't have a choice but to stay. That's your excuse for spending years doing something you hate? Sure, they'd be mad, but at a certain point you don't get to blame other people for you hating your life if you're not doing anything to fix it, Aviva.
He's right.
You should have sucked it up and said something years ago. He shoved the remote into her hand.
Screw those people if they're going to be pissed off at you for leaving someone you hate.
And then reloaded his gun. A shriek came from inside the ship as pieces of metal clanged across the ground, and the clawing of paws came running again. Live your life the way you actually want, Aviva, or I swear I'm gonna haunt you so bad. Before she could react, he started firing his gun into the ship, then sprinted off into the trees away from her. She stood in shock as the muscle-bound, furry fiend, the Keto Vadas, came skidding out of the ship with its shark-like teeth bared and beady eyes locked onto Gorlin. The image of Gorlin getting mauled shot through her mind. It hit her all at once that he'd always been there, trying to get her to talk, and she just never accepted the help. She'd been so convinced that she had to just suffer in silence. Now, he was literally willing to die to let her have a shot at a better life, even though she'd been wasting hers for years. She couldn't just let him die. She whipped out her stun discs and quickly set them for 2 minutes. Gorlin was far away now, but she had pretty precise aim. These things couldn't do anything to a creature as tough as the Keto Vadas, but they'd work instantly on Gorlin. Aviva chucked both of them at him just in case. One missed over his right shoulder, but the other hit dead on his back and instantly knocked him out, dropping him to the ground. He was out cold without a second to react. The creature caught up to him and just stopped. It snarled at him angrily. Like Terminax had said, this thing hunted for sport. She'd banked on it being well fed already and just needed to make Gorlin an unappealing target to hunt. Plus, his plan had still sort of worked.
It's like
the wire had gotten down just far enough for Aviva to jump up and grab it, then reverse its pull towards the ship. The Keto Vadas looked like it still may claw into her brother for good measure though, so she activated and tossed her hologram disc into the forest away from him. It lit up and a lifelike projection of her emerged. It started talking as if it was lost. The creature's eyes shot over to it, but immediately it sniffed the air, then whipped its head towards the real Aviva. It leaped up into a tree and scrambled up its branches. She was only a third of the way to the ship when the creature leaped out right towards her. Its claws would have been tearing through her if she didn't let go. That fall could have seriously injured her, but she flung herself towards a nearby tree and smacked her forearms. Her blades popped out and dug into the side, stopping her fall. The Keto Vadas flopped through the air, missing its target, but flipped just before hitting the ground and landed on its feet. Instantly, it leaped onto the tree she was on and started tearing its way up towards her. It was one leap away from reaching her, and she retracted her blades quickly and turned. She started to fall and slid right between the creature's belly and the tree. Unfortunately, she forgot about its tail. As she got nearly past it, the blade at its tail's end swung right for her head. She raised an arm to block it. The tail smashed her own augment arm to pieces. The pain made her shriek, but at least she'd saved her head. Just before hitting the ground, she popped her other blade out again to stab into the tree to slow her fall. But it barely helped. Her legs slammed the forest floor and she felt both ankles buckle beneath her. Even still, she scrambled across the ground, not sure where she was going, but just trying to get away. That was sadly futile. The creature dropped out of the tree right in front of her with glowing drool dripping from its maw. It didn't pounce, yet, as if it was letting her stew in what was about to happen. One arm was mangled, but she raised the blade of the other in front of her. Sorry, Gorlin. Hope you can live enough for both of us. As the monster reared its head back, a sharp whistle rang across the forest. The creature suddenly stopped and turned back to the ship. Standing in the bay doorway was a tall, muscular, well-scarred catman. He simply nodded his head, and, to Aviva's shock, the Keto Vadas ran over to him and didn't start mauling him. It brushed its head up against his side and purred. He scratched under its chin and leered
It's just a big old kitty cat to him.
at Aviva. She wasn't sure if she now needed to prepare to fight him, but after a moment of staring, he said,
Quick thinking to save your bud there. Pretty risky, too. Ship thinks that's enough for me to give you a proper second chance. Plus, didn't catch everything you said, but sounded like you were looking to get out of this life anyway. Guess I'd be a bit of a hypocrite for killing someone who just waited too long to finally do that. But now, time's up. Like I said, find a new line of work, or I might just come looking for you. And you won't be getting any mercy if we have to go round 2.
He turned and the creature followed him into the ship.
So.
Aviva called out in shock. Wait, you tamed that thing? How is that possible? He called back.
I was the only hunter smart enough to try it. Besides, I've always been a cat person.
The ship door slid shut, and soon after she felt the ground
You get it? Because he's a cat man.
shaking, tree branches shattered above, and she could feel the hot air of jets as the invisible vessel raised off the ground and disappeared into the rainy night sky. Aviva ran over to make sure Gorlin was okay and just waited next to him until he woke up. She didn't know about him, but she was definitely taking the advice. No matter how her family was going to take it, she'd find a new line of work. As horrible as this situation was, it was the wake-up call she needed to finally decide to start living her life her way.
I actually really hope her and her brother were able to get the hell out of this line of work and find a brand new life. Hell, maybe they could team up with Buster Terminax in saving some of these rare animals. Let's burn them in that animal preserve.
Fun fact, this story was originally going to be a bunch of criminals invading the Shark Tank while Unkillable Kate was the only one home, and it was going to be a little bit goofier, like Predator meets Home Alone with Kate being the Predator. But then I wanted a sci-fi angle in there, and I thought, ooh, Bustar Terminax with a bunch of poachers invading his ship. That's a fun idea. But anyway, if you want to know more about Bustar Terminax, there's a whole playlist with him as the narrator, and he's got an original story in there as well. Plus, I am still planning to do an episode where he and Harold the Herald team up because they were kidnapped by the same warlord. So they're sort of stepbrothers, and Bustar allegedly ripped off Harold's arms at some point when they were younger. But anyway, besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is the idea that when you decide to live your life your way, the way that feels right and you want to be living, that's not always going to mean you're making popular decisions, and not everybody in your life is necessarily going to like the things that you want to do to live your life.
Yep.
But if you just don't go after the life you want and try to appease the people around you, eventually that's just going to make you miserable. You may end up feeling like you're disappointing people around you, but at the end of the day, you have to live your life your way.
Happy.
I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.
Alright everyone, well that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of y'all next time when we flick back on. Till then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.